Thanks for the opportunity to address the 4th annual Rotary Forum hosted by the Rotary Club of Wellington. And I'm sorry I can't be present in person for this very important discussion on the role of NGOs, an issue I'm so familiar with through many years of interaction with NGOs while I was in public life in New Zealand, and now through my work at the UN Development Programme. In my experience, relationships between authorities and NGOs work well when they are based on mutual respect. But where NGOs are regarded rather narrowly as contracted service providers, and/or where their advocacy role is resented or not appreciated, NGOs can't play their full role, and the public interest and communities are the losers. In some countries where UNDP works, local NGOs, or civil society organisations as we generally call them, are constrained in their activities, sometimes quite severely. UNDP's Global Civil Society Advisory Committee, drawn from organisations around the world, does report that the space for civil society is shrinking in a number of countries. UNDP itself has a mandate to work to expand democratic governance and participation. And wherever possible, we support and we encourage local organisations to speak up for the needs of their constituencies and advocate for policy change and better services. The groups we work with are very diverse. When I meet with civil society representatives in countries I visit, there will generally be present representatives of women's organisations and/or of youth, the disabled, ethnic minorities, Indigenous peoples, people advocating on HIV prevention and treatment, and on open society, transparency and human rights. At the global level, the role of civil society is increasingly recognised as critical in achieving development goals. That's come to the fore in the current debate over what should replace the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs for short, which run their course at the end of next year. The MDGs had their basis in the United Nations Millennium Declaration. I signed that in New York in September 2000 as New Zealand Prime Minister. The MDGs set global development priorities, and they have been influential in getting faster progress towards universal primary schooling, lowering child and maternal death rates, turning the tide on HIV, malaria and TB, and improving drinking water, among other results. But a lot remains to be done to meet basic development benchmarks, and there is a desire to have a bigger, more ambitious and transformational sustainable development agenda in place from 2016. So, UNDP and other UN development agencies have been facilitating huge outreach to the global public on the new agenda. An online survey, My World, asks people to list their priorities for the new agenda, and more than 5 million people have responded, with health, education and jobs emerging as the most critical issues for them. Next in the list comes honest and responsive governance, and that is critical for getting sustained long-term development results. Last year, UNDP backed 88 national consultations on the new global agenda. Big efforts were made to reach out widely and include the most marginalised groups, whose opinion isn't generally sought at all. In recent months, we've been holding discussions with civil society organisations on the role they can play in moving development forward. In a global dialogue on this in October, there were 3 key conclusions. 1, there is a need to move from engagement to empowerment of civil society and ensure that civil society organisations are involved in policy formulation. 2, there needs to be support for building the enabling environments which establish civil society as credible development actors. Repressive laws, where they exist, stand in the way of that. 3rd, given the ambitious, emerging post-2015 development agenda, all partners, including civil society, do need to align their efforts to ensure complementarity, avoid duplication, and maximise the use of scarce resources. At UNDP, we are advocating for civil society to have a greater voice when policies are being designed, a role in monitoring the implementation of policy and commitments, capacity building for civil society organisations to play these roles, and a data revolution which would ensure more quality data and analysis and easy access to it. We believe that engaged and empowered communities and their organisations will be very influential in driving progress on global and national development goals. Of course, the challenges are very large. Poverty, for example, continues to be widespread despite tremendous progress in the past 3 decades. The number of people living in extreme poverty has dropped by many hundreds of millions in the past couple of decades, yet still next year, 1 billion people will be living on under $1.25 each a day. Poverty like this has many dimensions, and it is compounded by a lack of access to basic service and wherever dignity and rights are compromised by exclusion and discrimination. Rising inequality is another of the main challenges. 75% of people living in developing countries live in societies where income is less equally distributed now than it was in the 1990s. Income inequalities are also compounded by inequality in opportunity and access to services, in decision-making, and in access to information and knowledge. Then a third major challenge is environmental degradation. A number of our vital ecosystems are under serious strain. Extreme weather events are more frequent and more severe. Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in 2012, for example, was one of the greatest storms ever recorded, and it caused significant loss of life and livelihoods. In meeting all these challenges in developing countries, civil society has a big role to play in advocating for effective solutions and in being part of the action. That applies to civil society in developing countries and to NGOs in developed countries which offer their support. Many organisations in this room today have played their part. For example, the work of Rotary around the world on polio eradication is highly commendable. Today's event is looking at how NGOs can survive and thrive. It will be drawing on the experiences of NGOs which deliver services, NGOs which advocate, and NGOs which do both. Some will be struggling to be heard and to be funded. But one thing is for sure. It is the mark of a democratic society that civil society voices can be heard, can engage, and can contribute. So I hope that this event will encourage all present to be innovative in developing new partnerships, both between NGOs and with various levels of governments, with the objective of having the high quality services, the quality of life, and the citizen engagement which makes for a decent society. I hope you all have a great day at this event.